New 72 Radio, the voice, views, and visions of the collective.
Good morning. I'm Len Young, and I'm here with Dr. Stela Susac-Pavic and Rebecca Taylor-Shaw. And today we're going to talk about relationship. And of course, relationship is a very broad subject. And I'd like to start there, way out at the limits of what relationship might be, and talk about where our first relationships began. And for me, the first relationship we have is human relationship is with our mothers when we are in utero developing, and we're taking the time to become human in that aspect. But before that, we have another relationship. And that relationship is to God or the universe or the other, as Jungian psychology would term it, a place from where we came, or an existence of spirit that we then come into utero to develop. And so it's that relationship of self to self that I think guides us throughout our lives and helps us understand how to be on the earth and to interact with others and create all of our relationships. In Jungian psychology, Jung talked about archetypes in the universe, and one of the main ones was the capital S, which was the combination or the marrying of the conscious and the unconscious. And just bringing that into today's conversation, it's us being on earth and how we relate to this other. Do we keep it in mind, or are we going about our lives oblivious to what our own thoughts are, how we relate to others, and how we actually are hearing ourselves think? So looking at the broad aspect of relationship, I'd like to bring it into initially thinking of ourselves with ourselves. Do we listen deeply? Do we hear ourselves? If we are driving and we have the idea go slowly through that intersection, are we paying attention, or do we just plow on through because maybe we have an instinct that another car is going to come from another direction? Or if we think, as Rebecca, you have a great story about that instinct, if we have a feeling of being careful or of saying something to someone else, if they're having a difficult time, to follow through with it, then we're listening to ourselves. I mean, I think that relationship is why we're on earth. It's what we're here to experience with the earth, with our friends, with our families, and with the world. So Stella, what do you think about that? That's throwing it at you.
When we decide that we are going to address and share our knowledge and understanding of the relationship, as you know, we were discussing where to start with and how to place this different subjects of the relationship in the context that is understandable, and how to separate subjects from the subject. So it took me really some research to first define what is a relationship, and I like to go to the Webster dictionary. You see that I'm foreigner, so I first wanted to define what the relationship would mean for the broader audience and how to relate that to what I try to convey today to our listener. So it is defined like a relationship between two human beings, or a relationship between two objects, whatever objects we're talking about. So I found it interesting that it was not addressed also a relationship of each human being with its own thoughts, with its own decision-making process, with those inner thoughts and inner conversation that we are having almost daily and almost any moment in our lives. Even when we're talking and when we're listening, we do form the inner conversation that sometimes is defined, sometimes will move us toward to defining those thoughts a little bit more clearly later on when we are alone. And it is something that I finally understood is so changeable, and it's not so static. It's infinitive things that is, in one moment we right now understand how we want to approach certain subjects, certain relationship in a work, with a husband, religion, spirituality, but on any other moment in the life, years in front of us or moment in front of us, some other knowledge comes to us by reading, by listening, by praying, that actually change the course of our relationship with ourselves, with ultimate human, with the ultimate God, with the friends, with the husbands, with everybody else. So I did need to think really very deeply to define what a relationship is and how to approach this subject, and how to relate that for our conversation, how to proceed. So what I came into conclusion during that research, I found out that the question is unanswerable. There is no answer about the good or bad relationship, because the philosophy, religion, metaphysics, all of those science, since the written world is available to us on those stones or on the papyrus, or the huge amount of information that we have right now, and through the book, through the internets, that actually it's everlasting question what a relationship means and how to achieve the goal of the good relationship with our own, with friends, with husbands, on the work relationship with the earth. And age doesn't have anything to do with that. We do know that there is we call them old souls, the small human being who are in absolutely appreciation to the earth from the beginning, but we also have mature people in the powerful position that do not think about importance of the us to keep and take care of our natures on the way that natures deserve to be taken care of. So age doesn't have anything to do with a appropriate or good relationship. And what good relationship means, it's a peace. When in those beautiful moments when we are in peace with ourselves, when we have a good relation, when we have a good conversation between each other, when we have that beautiful goodness and light that is radiating through us, when the relationship ultimate is achieved in the love and honesty and respects, then we are the most happiest people on the world. So I am in exploration together with you ladies and together with our relationship with our listener to find that the key points that would be the leading points for us to achieve the peace through the relationship that we have. So I'm looking forward to explore the subjects to the core. Rebecca.
Yes, me too. So as we've introduced ourselves before, I'm a clinical hypnotherapist, and people come to my office for self-help for all different types of subjects, and inevitably relationships are going to come up in the conversation. One thing I really liked about what you said, Len, is about the mother and how the first relationship really impacts all of our later relationships in life. I was recently introduced to an old concept called attachment theory, and it talks about how you bond or don't bond, healthily bond, securely bond with your parents, or if there's insecurity or stress when you're growing up, if that parent is there for you and then not there for you, if they reject you in some way, we develop these different ways of interacting with the people who are closest to us in life. And then those ways of attaching or detaching follow us on into adulthood and affect our core relationships with spouses, significant others, our children. So that's a really interesting concept I would recommend people look into. It's called attachment theory, and it's in psychology. But just to give you an example of one would be someone who as a child was told to be quiet with their emotions. I'll give you something to cry about. That person may avoid later on in adult life being able to share intimate emotions with a significant other because they were taught as a child that that wasn't okay. And then unconsciously we play that out as adults. So that's one piece of it that I think is very interesting. The other is just becoming aware of how we can get stuck in playing certain roles in our relationships. Then in some way we can be feel burdened by that or stressed by that. So let's say among your friends and family, you're the rescuer. You're always rescuing people. That's the role you play. It's a comfortable role for you. You're good at it. Then it may be very hard for you to receive in relationships if you're always playing the rescuer. If you're always playing the victim, if you're always playing some other role, I think that's where we learn a lot about ourselves in relationships, is the roles that we play. If you're a mother and you're a mother all day long, can then you put that aside at night when you're with your spouse and let go of the mother role and become the wife role? And that is a really difficult thing for a lot of people. A lot of people bring their work home with them, and we'll talk more about that later. But what I think is really powerful is to believe and know that you have all these different parts of you inside, which is, I think, Len, what Jung would say too. We have all these sub-personalities or aspects of ourselves, and where we get stuck is when we get stuck in one role and find it difficult to dynamically flex into other ways of being. And
I was going to say, may I jump in there for just a second? To say that I think that's where developing our relationship with ourselves, or recognizing it, we don't have to develop it, it's there. If we can acknowledge it, excuse me, and listen. And so developing our listening abilities, we'll understand and we'll hear what nature has given us in being able to respond. And it brings a peace, Stella, like the peace you were talking about, of being on this continuum of not having an answer, but a relationship with somebody one day, 2 years later, may be very different. But if we're listening, we can be true to who we are and authentic to our actions and still function in that relationship as a friend, as a sibling, as a mother. So go ahead, Rebecca. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I thought it was important. It is that development of self that I think is very important.
And so just to sum up, this is kind of our general thoughts on relationships. I personally would sum that up with the suggestion to everyone that you be doing something to work on enhancing and understanding your own roles in relationships and how to enhance those. Many people think that we just have relationships by default, but I encourage you to pick up a self-help book or watch a video or something to learn how to develop and enhance your relationships and understand yourself so that you can do that. Because I think many times I see with couples where one person thinks, oh, we're married, I don't have to work on this relationship, it should just come naturally. It's really not like that at all. And that's where many people can get stuck in their relationships, is just thinking they're going to persist and last and flourish by default, when it really does take work, just like everything else. But it takes work to cook a meal at night, but a healthy meal, it's worth it. It doesn't necessarily take a lot of time, but it does take intention to support and grow those relationships in a healthy way. And with that, I wanted to lead into our second segment today, which we want to discuss work relationships. And the reason that I really believe that's important is because many of us spend more hours in the day with our work family infighting or getting along than we do with our home family or the people that we have in our home and our community. So, Len, do you want to kick us off by talking about work relationships?
Sure. Well, in my work life, which has been a number of years, I've had a great variety of experiences. I worked in a theater, a professional theater, in Canada for 4 years, and it was 24/7. And relationships were fairly critical because we had producers and actors and musicians and every kind of creative being you can imagine, plus the business aspect of being in a nonprofit but professional theater. Going from there to a big corporation in New York City and reverse commuting and wearing suits every day. I mean, it was really quite a change. And I had to change. I had to look at what was expected of me, how I was to dress, how I was to behave, what the interaction was. And one of the things that stood out was in the first corporation where I worked, I liked the people. I basically like everyone, but I liked the people. I found at that location, there weren't people I wanted to be friends, to meet for dinner, to go out with all the time after work. Whereas at the next place I went, I just immediately liked the people who were there. And I don't know what makes that. I felt like it was something from the top down that created an atmosphere in the corporation that said one of our intentions is that we have people who can get along, who listen to others, who are doing a good job or are helpful. But I felt huge support for me as a person. All of those times, those 3 times, I really would come back to myself. Am I comfortable here? Do I like getting up in the morning? Am I happy to get out of bed? And there were days when I wasn't, and I was reverse commuting and getting to work at 7 o'clock and getting home at 11 o'clock. And it was just an amazing rat race. And times during that period were really fun, and other times were very stressful. And I was put to the edge of my knowledge base. And so I think it's important when one's working that we ask that question every day, that we have our ritual of how we get up in the morning and what we do for ourselves. So even this morning, I got up out of the bed and I thought, okay, I've got to rush. I've got to make sure I'm here and da-da-da. And then I got down to have breakfast and I thought, you haven't meditated. Take 5 minutes. And I sat down quietly and went inward and prayed and meditated and went to that quiet place where I can hear the other. I can hear thoughts. I can hear my own intuition. And it was really motivating. And I felt uplifted and happy. And I thought, wow, I'm going on with my day. So I learned some things during that early time in my career about taking care of myself, exercising, eating well, and listening to myself, that has become critical in being in my own business where I self-motivate every single day of my life. And if I have a day when I am pulling myself out of bed and feeling that perhaps it's a more grueling day than another day is planning to be, if I have a quiet place to retreat or bring in that peace, then I find energy. I'm energized and I can go about being who I am and hopefully making healthy decisions throughout the day. I mean, Stella, do you find that? Because you live an amazing, fast-paced life with 4 children and a full docket too.
So it is strange when you realize that you pull the role that you assign yourself, the role that you remember the most, like a nourishing role and rescuing role, that you actually assign to yourself as being mother of the 4 children, as well as a professionally trained physician, that your role is by definition somebody who is rescuing, and you transfer that role that you learn that you have to have on any relationship that you do have in your life, including my current role as a business owner. So it is a sort of devastating when you realize that you do and you are making a lot of mistakes in that role, because you are actually putting that main role that you assign to yourself in your work environment. So the things that I finding out right now is how to use mathematical formula at its best to define the people that I am responsible for, and again responsible for, in the term of the understanding of the character of the people I am boss of, and understanding what is their motivation, understanding what is actually what they need to make them more productive, to make them more happier, and do all of that by resources that are available to me. So let me just go back and says, I am responsible for them. That's the first things that me as a boss and the former worker, I do assume that my employee is responsible for my salary, for my benefits, for my working hour, for my vacation time. And right now, employee of mine think that I am responsible for all of that. And that is something that I try to understand how to change the culture of that. As you see by my accent, I'm coming from the different culture with a different work ethic and different relationship. Being here in United States, it teach me actually quite a bit of the value of the work, quite a bit of the value of the working relationship, quite a bit of those capitalism-based system in which me right now as an owner of the small practice really try to adjust myself for all of those responsibilities that are placed in front of me, that is causing definitely tremendous stress, and understanding that actually I have to pull myself outside of the role that I assign to myself and give other people the roles that I do believe that they have to have and they can assume. So it is quite a bit of the psychology that needs to be involved in the working environment from the position of employee or employer, in which you really need to understand who is the person in front of you. Is it capable mentally, physically to fulfill the role that you assign to them? What is the motivation for you toward that person and that person toward you? So let's see ideal world. How I would imagine ideal world of my workers. I would imagine that they do not work 8 hours a day or 7 hours with 1 hour of the break, 1 hour break for their lunch. I would allow them to work from their home or their work in the environment in which they feel that they can share their idea, growth, finding out the motivation, have between every 2 hours, 15 minutes exercises and stretching, fulfilling their work at the best, being the motivational for themselves and other, come back home not too exhausted, not too tired, and being able to fulfill other roles as a mother's, friends, and wife. But what is the life actually is in this society that we are living is, it's not like that. It is that they need to have a quote and the amount of the work done for me in order for us to survive as a community and as a business. So with all of those stress and everything, I'm learning every day how to approach different kind of the problems that I'm facing with my employee, with the people that we are relating with, and it is really struggle to find that beautiful balance that we are talking about. So what I decide to do, I decide to learn through the different book, through the different conversation, a self-improvement book in which I would first love to analyze myself from the inside, and get rid of the assigned role that I'm friend with everybody. I actually absolutely same Len as you. I love everybody. So, and I expecting the best from the everybody. I do not have any thought about that somebody doesn't give the best of themselves in every moment. This is how I approach my life. So my learning is right now to find actually in my working environment, understanding to empower other people to come up with their own motivation and to come up with the most honest answer, what they are looking from their working day, and is it possible to give them that or them earning that by their own mental and physical process. So it is challenging,
Oh, wow,
and I'm
Stella.
working on it.
That's
Yes.
exciting.
Yes, it is very exciting. Sometimes I wake up at 4:35 and says how I'm going to approach these things today that is in front of me. But what second thing is in my mind is how to actually ask the people around me to help me, because I don't want to be that rescuer anymore. I don't have a strength for that all the time.
So that's interesting, Rebecca. I mean, I know you have people who come to you who end up talking at length about relationships, and we're getting near the end of our program. Can you take over for several minutes and wrap us up? Okay.
Yeah, I think what I would sum up with is maybe just a tip for people at work. I think most of the people that come through seeing me who are struggling with stress at work, it's the relationships. It's not necessarily the work itself, but it's dealing with a difficult boss or difficult coworkers. And typically what I see with the people that do struggle is they tend to be the more compassionate, empathetic people who take on the energy and emotions and burdens of the people around them. It's a trait that we all admire, compassion and empathy, but in the workplace, sometimes it can become unhealthy for you. So I teach people, I talk about healthy detachment, which is if your boss is over there having a meltdown, let him have the meltdown or let her have the meltdown, and you can observe that, but you don't have to get sucked into that energy. If you're getting criticized by someone, I think the healthy detachment involves not having this knee-jerk response that what they're saying is true or bad. You can take in that information with interested curiosity and not immediately turn it into something denigrating about yourself. And then the other thing is many people get caught up on these roles of beyond the work problems. You might be the person that everyone goes to put out the fires at your office, but also many people will then, if they can sense that you're that empathetic lay counselor, they'll come to you with their personal problems and all of that. And I think that there's a much better way to go with people than to just try to constantly solve their problems and give them advice, especially if you see someone who is seeking that constantly, and that is to inspire people to solve their own problems and to give them words of encouragement that they can figure it out themselves. So that would be how I would, just my couple tips for the workplace. And but definitely read books, watch videos, do things to really understand yourself and the roles that you play in all your relationships, and especially in work relationships. It will definitely pay off in lowering your stress level.
And listen to yourself. Pay attention to who you are. Spend time by yourself. And we've enjoyed today. I want to invite everyone to go to our website, www.healthyviewhealthyu.com, to see our prior recordings. And we'll see you in a month, the second Wednesday in the morning, 9 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. Have a great week. Bye.
Dad, be with you.